Has marked the second anniversary of the October the 7th attacks in Israel, the terrorist invasion by Hamas, with a warning that anti-Semitism is on the rise in Britain. And the Israeli-American journalist Emily Schrader went undercover at a pro-Palestine protest at King's College London earlier on today. You can see Emily there actually with the flag, surrounded by people with hoods, sending out the usual barrack of abuse. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio now by Emily Schrader. Emily, welcome to the show. Obviously, it's 2 years on from that terrible pogrom by Hamas. You went down to King's College London there to witness what was on offer from the so-called intellectual cream of Britain. What did they say to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So as stated at the beginning, a little bit incognito, but I couldn't stay silent in response to what I was hearing and seeing, which were open calls for intifada, which is a violent uprising, calls for from the river to the sea, which is an eliminationist rhetoric calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. And so because of that, myself and just a few other pro-Israel supporters that were there actually stood up with the Israeli flag. It's really outrageous. It's a disgrace to see something like this on the streets of London, support for terrorism on the anniversary of October 7th. And something really important to remember is that on October 7th, Israel was not in Gaza. There was no occupation of Gaza. In fact, Israel didn't even respond to the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust until October 27th. So you cannot say that a protest being held on October 7th is somehow in support of Palestinians, when in fact it's really celebrating the massacre of October 7th.
Emily Schrader, you sat here for 2 hours with me just last week when we saw an Islamic terrorist incident at a synagogue in Manchester. Like, we thought, maybe we hoped, that might be a wake-up call to Britain, to the Prime Minister, to the police, to the general public, just to take a pause and take a day off. Today is the anniversary. They're not taking a day off. They're up in the ante.
No, it's outrageous. And, you know, there are protests that have been planned throughout different European cities. And I was pleased to see that in Germany, they actually canceled the anti-Israel protest that was being held. In Italy, they canceled at least one of them. And yet somehow here in the UK, where we just saw an Islamist terrorist attack, they couldn't do anything about this shameful protest that was openly supporting terrorism, calling for intifada in the streets of London. It's outrageous.
And Emily, you sent me some pictures earlier and some video. We're going to try and get those on our screens if we can. This is very personal to you, that October the 7th attack. You know, you lived in an area that was bombed at that time. So let's go back in time, if we can, to that horrendous invasion. And then you went on in your journalistic work to visit some of the sites of the invasion, of the massacres.
Yeah, so I woke up that morning to rocket alarms, which was at the time pretty unusual for Tel Aviv. I live in South Tel Aviv. We don't get a lot of missiles usually. The Gaza Strip border communities get a lot. But that was how I woke up. And when I looked at my phone, I discovered horrific footage that was already coming in from early in the morning of Hamas terrorists who had invaded southern Israel that were massacring innocent civilians. And just a few days later, my neighborhood was hit with a missile from the Gaza Strip, direct hit in the area. And the first time I was in that area, in Kibbutz Be'eri, some of the footage that you just saw on the screen, there was still body bags still there. There was blood on the floor from when people had been burned alive, children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children. 1,195 people massacred, 250 kidnapped, 378 slaughtered at a music festival where people went to celebrate from over 40 nationalities on that day. I mean, it's hard to describe the scope of how horrific this incident actually was. And bringing us back to today, we see these protests at a time when 48 hostages are still in the Gaza Strip. It's appalling.
That footage we had on our screens there, we'll get some of it back up now, but some of it was simply too distressing to put out on television. It was literally the post-massacre at the music festival. You know, the bodies at that music site were simply inconceivable in its sorrow. This is your neighbourhood, right? This is at the time...
This is my neighbourhood, and that is the site of a direct hit just next door to my building. In fact, when it happened, I was certain that my building had been hit. The entire ground shook. Everything smelled of gunpowder, of explosive material. And the second I actually went downstairs to see what had happened, another alarm went off, which is something that we see frequently from these terror groups to draw people out and then attack again. So just horrific footage, and then here you see some of the sites in Kibbutz Be'eri. The markings on those buildings, for those who don't understand Hebrew, actually denote the bodies or the number of bodies that they found in those homes. Those are private civilian homes. And I'm sorry that this is so graphic, but what we're seeing now is actually dried blood from someone who had been burned alive in one of those homes. Just horrific scenes, absolutely sickening. I remember that after my first time reporting in that area, I actually went home and was physically ill for pretty much the rest of the day. Again, hard to describe the scope of how evil what we saw that day was. And to see people today not only failing to condemn it, but even celebrating it, celebrating this as if it was something positive for Palestinians, or certainly not for Israelis, it's shocking and heartbreaking.
But even